around the nation, PYT Nation, Jeff Waldrop here. Welcome to the show. It's Tuesday. Got a good show for you guys today. Boy, we have a lot of stories, so we're just gonna have to kind of get right into it. But man, we've got public polling on Donald Trump's Iran strike. What do people think about it? Oh, and the more important question is, how does this tie into impeachment? Now that's a question. So we're going to talk about that. Then, of course, we have Donald Trump very, very concerned about a possible upcoming Senate trial, so much that he is calling for complete dismissal of the articles of impeachment. Republicans are saying, no, not going to happen. However, the twist in that story is you're going to find out. There is a twist in that story, and I'm not going to give that away, but we'll do that later on. Then we got the attacks on Bernie have begun. Okay, the Bernie blackout is over officially, and yes, there have been attacks before, but now the establishment is going all out and has involved Elizabeth Warren. So, oh boy, that's a story. So we got a couple of those related stories as well. And then we've got Chris Matthews basically calling Bernie Sanders dangerous. Well, like to go back to Breaking Bad, one of those references, you could say that Bernie Sanders, he is the danger. So we'll talk about that. And then, of course, we have disastrous climate news. So, none of this might not matter in a few years because we're all toast. All right, anyway. So I laugh because, if I didn't, I would cry. All right, anyway, I'm also in a little bit of pain as well. So I was out yesterday, of course. And look, to be 100% transparent, I was out because this weekend I had another back injury, which caused me to basically shoot the entire weekend in the foot because I was laid out for the last 3 days. So wonderful. But hey, I am back. I'm not back to 100%, but I'm back enough to where we can do the show. And I think it's going to be a pretty good show. So please stick around. And again, I want to be honest with you guys because, look, not everybody, kind of allows the audience into their living room. Like you guys allow me into your living room. So it's I want to be 100% straight with you. I do not have the greatest health in some, because I've had some previous injuries working in factories. Working in manufacturing because I'm a working guy in blue collar. That's my roots. That's where I come from. And that stuff leaves permanent damage on your body. And so that's why it's another reason why I'm a voice for the working class because, people like me, we get hurt and then oftentimes we don't have insurance. And so that's another reason I fight for Medicare for all for everybody. And so a lot of what's happened in my life has really shaped my political views in a way that, that doesn't get represented. And one of the only representatives for the working class that I've seen, Senator Bernie Sanders. And so, again, a lot of what my life experiences and experiences of a lot of people in the working class, that is why we support people like Bernie Sanders. Okay, anyway. So let's go into our first story here. Turns out that most Americans are not buying the administration's justification for the attack on Iran's second most powerful official. That was, of course, General Qasem Soleimani. Okay, so now this is according to a new insider poll. Following the airstrike, which escalated tensions to basically the worst that they've been in years, the administration gave a lot of terrible, sometimes contradictory explanations as to why they decided to target and kill Soleimani while he was in Iraq. So now there was reporting, and I talked about this from the Gray Zone, That said, and this was according to Iraq's foreign minister, or I'm sorry, prime minister, that Soleimani was on an Iraqi-backed mission of peace in the region. He was trying to broker between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Again, Iraq was in the middle of it, trying to broker that peace, right? When he was killed. So that explains why he was in Iraq in the first place. Now, that's not bad enough. We also find out later on that Trump had ordered the strike to curry favor with hawkish GOP senators so that they would come out on his side when it comes to impeachment. And now, the administration, of course, every excuse that they put out. Oh, imminent threat. No, it's revenge for their attacking our bases. But then there's an imminent threat to our troops in the area. So we had no choice. We had no choice. Well, that of course has unraveled, as we have found that there's absolutely no evidence that backed up their claims of an imminent strike. Now, on Sunday, for example, Secretary of Defense Mark Esper told Face the Nation that he, quote, didn't see the evidence to support Trump's claim that Soleimani was about to attack U.S. embassies. Because, of course, right? We have no evidence of an imminent attack. We have plenty of evidence that Trump was just doing this in order to help with his impeachment trial. And that's really sad when it comes down to it, that he would put us to the brink of war with another sovereign nation because he's afraid of impeachment. Now, the interesting part about this is that everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. Now, the media is like, oh my God, can you believe this? That he would actually do something like this? Really? Really? But of course, the media, they have a different problem. They're cheerleaders of every single war in the Middle East. But however, let me go to the over 1,000 respondents in a SurveyMonkey poll that said this. Shortly after President Trump was impeached by the House of Representatives, the administration escalated the conflict with Iran. This led to sporadic armed conflict between the two nations. What best describes your view about these events? So that's the question they asked. And in all, a majority of Americans, about 60%, believe the timing of the strike was somehow connected to impeachment, including over a quarter of respondents who said the strike was, quote, definitely related to impeachment, compared to the just 27.8% who did not think the timing was linked. Those, 27.8% apparently are incredibly gullible and will buy anything the administration tells them, including from intelligence sources that literally 2 weeks ago, they said, we're all fake news and we're part of a deep state plot to take down Donald Trump. Ridiculous. Let me give you more of the breakdown here. 18.6%, they didn't believe the timing was linked whatsoever. 9.2%, the timing is probably not linked. 16.8% said the timing is possibly linked. 16.7% said that they thought the timing was probably linked. 26.5% say they believe the timing is definitely linked. And 12.5%, just weren't sure. Guess they weren't paying attention. So now I think that 60% should be a lot higher because I think it's obvious. It should be 80%, right? But I think a lot of that is because the mainstream media pushed the narrative of this attack without question, that there is an imminent threat. Here you had the establishment media doing their jobs, doing the job of and I'm not saying their jobs, doing the job of the administration in pushing these wars, into the job of the defense contractors in pushing for war with Iran. The media continues to push war in the Middle East. And by the way, make sure that we, don't question our intelligence agencies. Which, by the way, our intelligence agencies should be questioned. And I know, look, here's the thing. Here's the difference about the Mueller report and the Ukraine stuff, right? When it comes to the intelligence agencies, they actually have receipts. Back in 2003, they did not have receipts. They wouldn't show us the receipts, right? And so they just said, well, you got to take us at our word. Iraq is going to definitely attack us. Iraq is looking into doing weapons of mass destruction. They could even have a nuclear weapon. We got to stop the Iraqis. But we're not going to show you any evidence. You just have to trust us. Well, we've learned since then, and we've learned that we should not take our intelligence agencies at face value unless they have some evidence, some compelling evidence. And in this case, they absolutely had nothing. And yet the mainstream media continued to push out this narrative that no, the intelligence agency, you're right. And they say that there is an imminent threat. And so we have to attack Iran. Bull crap. Complete and utter garbage. All right. Now, there's also a significant number of Republicans that no matter what, they're going to say, well, Soleimani was a bad guy, so bomb Iran. Bomb Iran, as John McCain used to say, right? They don't care. They think Iran bad, Muslims bad, we must bomb them all. They hate us because they hate us, and yet they wonder why, right? In reality, of course, things are much more complicated, as reality tends to be. We have been putting punishing sanctions in their country for years, which has touched every part of their economy. Thanks to Trump, we ended the nuclear deal, which actually stopped them from getting a nuclear weapon and actually led to the inflaming of tensions between our two countries. All for, by the way, and by the way, this is all for political gain. And then he adds in that attack on Soleimani for even more political gain. And unsurprisingly, it backfires on him because he doesn't think things through. Of course. And by the way, he tried to do exactly what he had charged President Obama with doing back in 2013, 2014, 2015, right? Obama's going to start a war with Iran. I think it was actually back in 2011 as well. He's going to start a war with Iran to help his sagging poll numbers. Well, now we had exactly that same situation with Donald Trump. And it backfired bigly. Okay. Anyway, more impeachment related stuff. President Donald Trump is deeply concerned about the impeachment trial upcoming in the Senate. So much so that he tried to start a war with Iran over it, and now has called on Congress for a, quote, outright dismissal of the charges of obstruction of Congress and abuse of power. So he details that in a tweet earlier today. He said, many believe that by the Senate giving credence to a trial based on the no evidence, no crime, read the transcripts. We would love to read the transcripts, but it's locked away in a secret server. No pressure impeachment hoax rather than outright dismissal. It gives a partisan Democrat witch hunt credibility that it otherwise does not have. I agree. So now, okay. Look, that's verbal, just basically verbal diarrhea at this point, right? That's what we get from the president of the United States when you check his Twitter feed. But okay, look. Nancy Pelosi is scheduling a hearing in order to vote to give the articles of impeachment to the Senate, right? Which she's supposed to do, but she hasn't done it so far because she's concerned, rightly so, that the Senate's not going to give her a fair trial. Okay, totally. I get it. Now, the thing is, Nancy could also add more articles of impeachment before giving it to the Senate. But unfortunately, she's playing the hands of the Republicans. And I will explain that in a little bit. Now, Pelosi, as I said, called for a vote. Now, what's interesting about that, right, is when she delivers the articles of impeachment to the Senate and begins that Senate trial, well, that's going to take a couple of senators out of play who are also running for president, one Senator Bernie Sanders. So her timing is kind of interesting as she sat on this impeachment for quite some time and then decides, okay, now we're going to have a vote to send it to the Senate. Fascinating, right? Bernie Sanders, by the way, he's leading in Iowa and is tied in New Hampshire. So he's got real momentum going into the Democratic primary. So again, curious timing about that, right? So Trump, for his part, again, called for the outright dismissal of impeachment. And Yet Republican senators, including members of the party's leadership, are simply saying no. We're not going to do that. Now, what's interesting here, I'm going to give some quotes, but is the twist coming up. Now, Senator Roy Blunt, fourth-ranking GOP senator, told reporters on Monday that, quote, our members generally are not interested in a motion to dismiss. Blunt also added that there certainly aren't enough votes for such a motion, which would require a simple majority or 59 votes. Okay. Now, there are also other senators, including Mitt Romney, Suzanne Collins, Rob Portman, Lamar Alexander, have all expressed opposition to the idea of an immediate dismissal of the articles of impeachment against Trump. Collins told reporters on Monday, quote, I would vote against a motion to dismiss immediately. Absolutely. Alexander told the New York Times, quote, we're taking an oath to be impartial, and that to me means we have a constitutional duty to hear the case, ask our questions, and then decide whether we want additional evidence in terms of documents or witnesses. Mitt Romney said, I will not be supporting a motion to dismiss. He adds that the allegations are serious and deserve to be given consideration, and that the Trump team needs to make its case as well. So now, before you think, okay, look, we've got all these moderate senators, moderate Republican senators on our side. You okay? They're letting this go forward and not, siding with Trump to dismiss because they believe in the rule of law. Oh, that's fantastic. No, that ain't it. Let me tell you why. Senator Mitch McConnell, he's the Senate Majority Leader, right? And other top Republicans have indicated that they would rather have a vote of acquittal rather than a dismissal as a way to more strongly vindicate the president. So Mitch McConnell's like, yeah, no, I want to get the impeachment articles here. I don't want to dismiss them because that doesn't look good on us. But if we acquit him, like we already plan to do, because we don't care about the evidence, we don't care about the facts, we're going to play team politics here and just acquit him of everything, well, then that looks good for him. So now why has Donald Trump not gotten the memo? Because Donald Trump's an idiot, and he doesn't understand how this game is played. The game is rigged in his favor. All these Republicans who are so-called moderates, well, they're not moderate at all. There's no such thing as a moderate Republican now. So you can bet that Suzanne Collins, Mitt Romney, all these Republicans, Lamar Alexander, will likely vote to acquit. And there might be a chance that Mitch McConnell, because Suzanne Collins is not doing very well in her reelection bid, Mitch McConnell might say, okay, you can vote against or you can vote for impeachment if you think that's going to help you, because I already know we have enough. There's 53 Republican senators, so 2 of them can vote against dismissal, right? And 2 of them, of course, can vote against removal of the president, right? So there is some wiggle room here where McConnell could say, okay, I'll let you not vote for this, and so to help your political career. As long as we get the result of acquitting the president, which is ultimately good for the president. So, and look, acquittal is much better than dismissal for the president because it will help him politically. He can go and say, well, look, I'm acquitted of all the crimes, which means I didn't do any crimes. There we go. So now I'm still president. He's too stupid to understand that, though. And so he's like, we must have it dismissed. I don't want to go to trial. But trial is literally your best option. He doesn't get it. He doesn't get it. And look, let me go for Pelosi, back to Pelosi, right? So now I think Pelosi is helping Trump in a way. Now you might think, well, that's crazy, Jeff. Why would you think that? Why would you think that Nancy Pelosi, the woman who's bringing articles of impeachment against the president, help the president? How does that help him? Well, look, remember, Nancy Pelosi fought the hardest against filing articles of impeachment. It was progressives and even some so-called moderate Democrats in some of the swing areas that were getting a little nervous and saying, wait a minute, this is too much for us to ignore. So we're going to have to do something, right? Because our constituents are demanding that we impeach Trump over these issues. So she got pressured into doing articles of impeachment. And so as a result, they ended up filing pretty weak sauce articles. Again, obstruction of Congress, right? And abuse of power. These are pretty general types of articles. They could go in a lot deeper. They could go in a lot more detail and go after some of Donald Trump's, financial crimes, for example, stuff that we found out, the Stormy Daniels stuff, hush money payments. And there's a whole target-rich environment of which you could draft articles against the president. And yet they decided to not go in that route and to play it quote unquote super safe, right? So there's a reason for that. And it's because Donald Trump is an excellent boogeyman. Look, Nancy Pelosi has successfully fundraised off Donald Trump. And not only that, but it also gives her an excuse as to why she can't push for progressive policy like what the base actually wants. Oh, well, look, I'm sorry, Trump's in the White House. Nothing we can do. We can't go for Medicare for all. The Republicans will oppose it. What can we do? This is how bad Democrats give cover to Republicans. And how Republicans, by the way, help corporate Democrats continue that payday, that grift. Remember, Nancy Pelosi gets a lot of money from a lot of different industries, most notably big pharma and health insurance companies. And so she's not going to be in favor of any legislation like Medicare for all. And so even though it's got a 70 to 80% approval rating among Democratic voters, so Democratic voters really want Medicare for all, single payer. Democratic voters really want things like a $15 living wage, and having Republicans not only in the White House but also in the Senate gives Nancy Pelosi cover, because all she can say is, well, the Republicans will never pass it, so we might as well not even try to push for it. It's that kind of milquetoast centrism that has lost Democrats over 1,000 seats during Obama's reign. So this whole thing is a racket. And all of this means that, unfortunately, I think Donald Trump is going to win this impeachment fight. He will get acquitted and will not be removed. And it's because the major players in power would rather have him there to fundraise off and to be a boogeyman than to actually follow the law and the Constitution. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go actually take a quick break. And then we'll come back. We've got switching gears. We're going to go to the Democratic primary, where we've got some devastating stories about Elizabeth Warren versus Bernie Sanders. Then we have Bernie Sanders gets trashed by Chris Matthews. And then here comes the ocean. Water, big water. Ocean water. When we come back from the break. Stay right here. Run the Nation.
Mike Pence.
Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, TWT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. All right, so first, since we're back, I want to thank a couple of patrons, patreon.com/TYT Nation. Let me go there and thank For the Truth. And also for our 9999. Some of the names you guys come up with, wild. But thank you anyway. Patreon.com/TYT Nation. That's you can support us. Let's go to channel members as well. And I want to thank John Young and Frank Harris. So thank you. You can become a channel member by hitting the join button below. All of it goes, of course, to help independent progressive media. All right. So now I want to go to a comment here from a channel member. Sarge Tech says, acquitting Trump does not make him look good. If anything, it makes Moscow, Mitch, and the Republican-controlled Senate look like dishonest crooks, letting a criminal escape justice. So here's the thing, right? So if Nancy Pelosi were to pile on very specific charges in those articles of impeachment, then you would absolutely be correct. But now you have this very, very general, very broad abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. These are BS charges regular people don't care about. Oh, the obstruction of Congress. Ooh, well, Congress is obstructing everything anyway, so nobody cares. That's like that's a feeling that I get from regular, everyday people. So when they see like Trump get acquitted, I think the reaction is going to be like, yeah, well, of course, whatever. I mean, I don't think a lot of people could even go and regular people, right, could even go and name these impeachment charges against Donald Trump. So, look, I'm just kind of laying it out from my perspective, and perhaps I'm wrong, and perhaps I'm underestimating, regular working people. And look, I know that they get underestimated a lot, but if you're not paying attention, I think that you're not really getting what's going on here. And you guys get it because you are paying attention. But I think a lot of people that are not, they're not going to understand or really understand the significance or get the significance of the charges against Donald Trump. And look, again, I might be wrong. I totally freely admit that. All right. So thank you to those, to the supporters. And thank you to Star Trek for asking that or making that comment here and being a channel member. So now let's get to more stories. And the next couple ones are a doozy. All right. A watchdog group is going after an article, a CNN hit piece against Bernie Sanders, that claims that Sanders told Elizabeth Warren that a woman cannot win the presidency. And so this, of course, has ignited new charges of sexism against the Bernie Sanders campaign. So now that article by CNN correspondent MJ Lee cited 4 anonymous staffers and friends of the candidate that claim that Bernie Sanders made that statement to Warren in a 2018 meeting at Elizabeth Warren's house, in which the candidates announced that they will, of course, both be running against each other. And so now that's kind of interesting that didn't come out back then, that suddenly it comes out now. Bernie Sanders is leading in Iowa and is doing really, really well in New Hampshire and other states. Fascinating, right? So now the watchdog in question is FAIR, the Foundation for Accuracy in Reporting. They went after this piece saying in an article in their headline that it doesn't pass the smell test, which is another way to say complete and utter horse crap. All right, so now let me examine why that is. Now, for one, these staffers that were cited were not actually there. They weren't actually in the meeting. They weren't even there to witness this. 2 of them, according to Lee, spoke to Warren shortly after the meeting. The other 2 sources were described only as people who, quote, knew about the meeting. So you've got very, very weak sourcing here that was not firsthand knowledge. That were, and by the way, they're completely anonymous sources. They were not even in the room. So how can CNN stand by this reporting? I'm starting to get a little bit more sympathetic to Trump supporters who are saying, well, the fake news against President Trump. You're citing anonymous sources that weren't even in the room. Ugh, they might have a point, and that's disastrous. And I hate everything about it. So now, Sanders, of course, issued a denial to CNN, who, by the way, this is now apparently what passes for journalism in CNN. Like, that's disastrous. Now, he said this, quote, "It is ludicrous to believe that at the same meeting where Elizabeth Warren told me she was going to run for president, that I would tell her that a woman couldn't win. It's sad that 3 weeks before the Iowa caucus and a year after that private conversation, staff who weren't even in the room are lying about what happened." Very strong words from Sanders. What did I say? What I did say that night was that Donald Trump is a sexist, a racist, and a liar who would weaponize whatever he could. Do I believe a woman could win in 2020? Of course. After all, Hillary Clinton beat Donald Trump by 3 million votes in 2016. So look, that's the point, right? He was saying Donald Trump will lie about you. He will use sexist smears. He will attack you in every way possible. So that's going to make it difficult for any candidate, and not just Elizabeth Warren, not just a woman, right? And we see what he did to Hillary Clinton. And so, yes, he was making that point to say it's going to be a very difficult campaign. That was not saying, that's not the same thing as saying a woman can't win, which again is not at all what he said. So now, obviously, I'm going to believe Bernie Sanders over some rando sources that weren't even in the room. And it's not just because I like Bernie Sanders. It's because in no situation has Bernie Sanders ever said anything remotely like that. In fact, there's a lot of evidence, a lot of video evidence to the contrary, and I'm going to show that to you now. This is Bernie Sanders back in 1988 as he was announcing his support for the Jesse Jackson campaign. Take a look.
The real issue is not whether you're black or white, whether you're a woman or a man. In my view, a woman could be elected president of the United States. The real issue is, whose side are you on? Are you on the side of workers and poor people, or are you on the side of big money and the corporation?
1988 Bernie sounds a lot like 2019 and 2020 Bernie. You know why? That's because they're the same. Bernie Sanders has been consistent throughout his entire career saying the same things. Back in 1998 saying, look, I don't care if you're a woman can win. A woman can definitely win. But it matters whose side you're on, if you're on the side of the people or you're on the side of the corporations. And unfortunately, there are a lot of politicians that happen to be on the side of the corporations, and those are the ones that are smearing Bernie Sanders. So now, I'm not done. I've got another piece of evidence here. This is Bernie Sanders in 1987 telling a group of kids that a woman has as much right to become president as a man. Take a look.
One other woman governor. The mayor of San Francisco is a woman, and there are many women mayors, but not enough. And one of the very important things, and I hope that all the girls in this class understand, that you, just as much as the boys, have a right to become president. There's not been a woman president, although there was a woman who was giving thought to running for president this time, from Colorado, a woman named Representative Schroeder gave some thought. So I hope that the girls will think that they have the right to be involved in politics quite as much as the boys do. It's beginning to change, but it's not changing fast enough.
You notice there at the end, it's beginning to change, but it's not changing fast enough. Basically, he's saying the opposite of what he's being charged of, that he wants more women involved in politics. And he's saying, look, you have just as much right as a woman to be involved in politics, and you should be involved in politics, and you have as much right as a man to become president of the United States. That's Bernie Sanders in 1987, saying the same thing that he was saying in 1988, that he's been saying in 1998, that he's been saying in 2008, that women can definitely become president of the United States. and that more women and young people should be involved in politics. That's why Bernie Sanders has supported people like AOC and Rashida Tlaib. They supported her, I'm sorry, he supported them. Now they support him. It's ridiculous to continue to throw around this charge of sexism towards the Bernie Sanders campaign when there's so much evidence out there of the opposite, that he does fight for reproductive rights, and not just for reproductive rights, but for positions of power for women. And the only prerequisite is that you have to be on the side of regular working people. If you're on the side of the corporations, it doesn't matter. If you're a woman, if you're black, if you're Latino, whatever, you're on the wrong side because you're serving the wrong people and not the actual citizens. That's Bernie Sanders' message. I don't care who you are. I'm with you if you're with us and the working class and regular people. And so this is ridiculous, man. The entire smear, right? So now, here's the thing. Anybody who knows Bernie Sanders knows that this is not, that the smears are not Bernie Sanders' character, right? That's not who he is. He's not a sexist person. Now, Elizabeth Warren claims to know Bernie, claims to be very close to Bernie, right? And yet she released a statement on this. And she says, well, I don't want to talk about this private meeting. Wait, you don't want to talk about it? You're the one person who could come back and say, hey, you know what? I was obviously there in that meeting. I was the one in the meeting talking with Bernie Sanders. And no, he did not say that. He said that, Trump is sexist, misogynist, whatever. But no, he never said that a woman cannot win the presidency. She could come out and solve this problem. And it speaks a lot of her that she has not, that she's decided to, not say, oh, no, yeah, this definitely happened. That's exactly what he said. Because, of course, that would be a 100% lie. So she says, I want to talk about it. Absolutely no political courage. How about you start having some integrity and standing up for your friend? I mean, this is deeply disappointing, especially when, again, there's so much evidence out there showing that Bernie Sanders is a strong feminist ally. And so what this does, by the way, this makes people wary of being feminist. Why? Because all they see is dishonest actors out there, in the media especially, using it as a weapon against good, honest progressives. And that's not feminism. That's the opposite of feminism. When you weaponize it against other people who don't deserve it, no. The whole point of feminism is to build people up, not to tear them down, especially the people who are your strongest allies. This is a deeply disappointing look for Elizabeth Warren and the establishment as well. All right. So let's go further with this. It looks like the media has finally gotten the war between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren that they have been wanting. Now, this all started with a report by Politico. Now, that Politico report included written guidelines for Sanders volunteers calling potential voters who might support other candidates. So now, there's supposedly a script, right? And in this script, Sanders volunteers are advised to characterize Warren supporters as highly educated and affluent. Well, okay, already I don't seem to see the problem. It's kind of like hey, your supporters are highly educated and affluent. It means they're really smart people and they're wealthy. Okay. And what's the problem with that? Well, that's an image problem for Elizabeth Warren, who claims that she's fighting for the working class and the middle class. Oh, now look, she does a lot better than a lot of the other establishment candidates, but certainly there is one candidate that does have the support of the working class, and that's Bernie Sanders. So now, here's the thing. So now you look at that, right? And you wonder, where's the lie? You look at the demographics in Warren's support, and that's generally true. Affluent, highly educated, and actually white. Now, Bernie Sanders has a younger, more diverse set of supporters from working class backgrounds. For example, you have a lot of servers and you have a lot of warehouse workers, right? So those are the people that back Bernie Sanders. So there must be something else in that script that is completely outrageous. Well, okay, I'm going to read it. So here's how it starts. I like Elizabeth Warren, and that's, of course, optional, right? In fact, she's my second choice, but here's my concern about her. People who support her are highly educated, more affluent people who are going to show up and vote Democratic no matter what. She's bringing no new bases into the Democratic Party. So now, where's the lie, right? Sanders does better with independents, and even some Republicans have voiced a willingness to vote for Bernie Sanders. Him being an independent and not as well attached to the Democratic Party and being able to push back against the Democratic Party, well, that actually is pretty advantageous if you're trying to build onto the Democratic Party, bring more people into it. So, and not alienate them, right? So, okay, it continues. We need to turn out disaffected working class voters if we're going to beat Trump. The script section on Warren concludes. So, wait, where's the attack on Elizabeth Warren? Where's the trash? Where's the trash? All they did was cite demographic data that is easily verifiable. How dare they? How dare they attack the Honorable Elizabeth Warren? Slime her with such facts. Now, look, Warren responded to this, and she said, I was disappointed to hear that Bernie is sending out his volunteers to trash me. Bernie knows me and has known me for a long time. He knows who I am, where I come from, what I've worked on and fought for, and the coalition and grassroots movements we're trying to build. Now, there's more to that, but first, okay. So, look, I read you that script. Does that sound like trash to you? Well, no. Again, this is the same thing Politico has been saying for months. But no, sending his supporters. First of all, there's no evidence that Bernie Sanders was the one who said, do this script against Elizabeth Warren. Again, no evidence. And by the way, Bernie Sanders has never said anything publicly bad against Elizabeth Warren. He just hasn't. So I don't understand. Now, further, she goes, and this is, by the way, this is, this whole thing reeks of Consultant 101, right? And you're gonna see that. She said, Democrats want to win in 2020. We all saw the impact of the factionalization in 2016, and we can't have a repeat of that. Democrats need to unite our party, and that means pulling in all parts of the Democratic coalition. So she is basically repeating the lie, the smear that it was Bernie Sanders supporters that are dividing the party. This Bernie Sanders, he's dividing the party. We need party unity, and that Bernie Sanders is dividing the parties, making it easier for Donald Trump to win. Now, that is pure and utter BS. Garbage. And speaking of garbage, again, there's no trashing Elizabeth Warren in this. That's not saying anything negative about Elizabeth Warren. Again, this goes back to what Politico has been saying for quite some time. As Politico explained last July, Warren and Sanders' bases of support are somewhat distinct, despite their relative political proximity. More highly educated voters were more likely to support Warren, while lower income voters with less education more often supported Sanders. In September, the Washington Post attributed that to Warren's wonkish, policy-focused campaign style. That is mainstream corporate media saying the same thing that this script had said. Well, now, does that mean Politico was trashing Elizabeth Warren? Does that mean the Washington Post was trashing Elizabeth Warren? Or again, they're now using that to slam Bernie Sanders. 538 also talked about this in October. They said that Warren is doing particularly well with white, college-educated voters and starting to expand her base by making inroads with non-white voters without a college degree and more moderate voters. Bernie Sanders, of course, leads when it comes to non-white voters. Or actually, he's behind Joe Biden when it comes to non-white voters. But again, younger, diverse voters tend to go for Bernie Sanders. So now, a poll, by the way, later that month, still found that her supporters were more likely to be white, wealthy, and college educated. So, do we start calling them Warren Bros? Is that permitted now? I mean, they use that same smear against Bernie Sanders back in 2016. So maybe fair is fair, right? If we're actually now the campaigns are at war, which they seem to have instigated, then maybe that's fair. The Warren Bros. All right. Anyway, so now following this, 4 anonymous supporters of Warren then claimed that Bernie Sanders told her to her face that a woman can't win an election. So again, that's more allegations of sexism, right? That, of course, is incredibly poor sourcing. None of these people were actually in the room, and it looks to have been made up. But these allegations of sexism, first, thrown out there by the Hillary Clinton campaign and her staffers, continue to be lobbed at Sanders, and they continue to stick, despite Sanders' record on women's issues and video of him saying all the way back in the 80s that women could definitely run for president and become president. So now Bernie Sanders responds to this, and he calls it a media blow-up. Quote, "We have hundreds of employees. Elizabeth Warren has hundreds of employees. And the people sometimes say things they shouldn't. You have heard me give many speeches. Have I ever said one negative word about Elizabeth Warren? No, he hasn't. And as for the script, they're trying to verify its authenticity. First of all, there's no evidence that it was put there by Bernie Sanders. Now, Eric Isaac, a Kings County Democratic committee on Twitter, tweeted this out. Here's what happened. A random user who's ever only posted once posted that document in a Sanders volunteer Slack group. A moderator promptly removed it and stated that it was not a campaign source, despite, of course, mainstream reporters saying, oh, look, it's an official Bernie document. It's even got the paid for by Bernie, not the billionaires thing on it. It's legit. Well, look, even if it was, who cares? It's pretty innocuous. There's nothing negative about Warren. And again, that's exactly who her base is. White, wealthy, highly educated liberals. That's a fact. That's a fact. And look, she's doing way better with minorities than Pete Buttigieg, which, by the way, the script goes after Pete Buttigieg not having a lot of black supporters because of what he did in South Bend. And so, look, this is factual information. The fact is that Elizabeth Warren would use this to accuse Bernie Sanders of trashing her and not defend Sanders against the baseless charges of sexism. It really does show you who Elizabeth Warren really is. Her statement on the dinner, she said, quote, "I want to keep it a private conversation." Yeah, she's the one person who could set the record straight and instead puts out a BS statement. We're done with Warren. That shows who she is. And look, I understand this is a primary, right? And the whole part of the primary is to distinguish yourself to the voters. That script, real or not, is perfectly fine. The accusations of sexism, which likely came from her consultants, many of whom were former Clinton staffers, is the epitome of dirty politics. She's getting terrible advice. And what's worse is since that she's declining in the polls, she decided to take it. But you know what? You know what actually helped her decline in the polls? Made sure that she lost out on ground? Because she walked away from her policies. I know you could say, oh, but she still believes in Medicare for all. I don't believe so. Because she has a plan, public option first, and then 3 years later, introduce another piece of legislation to do a full Medicare for all. No, you only do that if you're not serious about getting this done. Anyone in politics knows that once you get into office, and if you get there on a mandate, right, and you say, this is what I'm going to do, you push for it, and you spend all your political capital on your one primary policy objective. And in this case, if Elizabeth Warren really cared about Medicare for all, she wouldn't set up two different fights because, let's be honest, no politician will have that kind of political capital to first spend it on a massive overhaul, adding a public option, and then an even more massive overhaul to a single-payer system. That's bad politics and bad politicking. And so that makes me feel like she is not actually serious about that plan. And it's deeply disappointing. Deeply, deeply disappointing. Which, by the way, is why Refund Warren was trending #1 on Twitter. That's a movement of people that are posting screenshots demanding that, and just like what they did with Pete Buttigieg, they demand their refunds from Act Blue. People that had given to, Elizabeth Warren after this disastrous, disgusting smear against Bernie Sanders are saying, we want our money back. And by the way, the day before, I Trust Bernie was also trending #1. So, look, there are a lot of people that were fooled into thinking Elizabeth Warren was not just another standard politician. And look, I even like some of her policies, right? I don't think they've gone far enough. And I like the fact that she's fought the banks. But in reality, it turns out that she, again, just like the others, is a standard politician who doesn't have as strong as a core as a lot of us believed she did. Well, at least now that's over. And going into Iowa and New Hampshire, being able to make that distinction and separate Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, well, that's going to end up being a good thing for Bernie Sanders. Okay. Moving on here. Although I do want to read a couple of super chats that came in. Yeah, they never show up. Okay. Zarp says, Warren implies that Bernie said it by not denying. Yeah, it's the implication. It's her saying, oh, no, I want to keep it private. But wait, you could end this entire thing by saying, no, he didn't say it. So, it's an act of political cowardice, which is something that I've talked about Elizabeth Warren before, being politically cowardice, not taking a side for example, in 2016, waiting for the primaries over to endorse Hillary Clinton, and then not going to, the DAPL protests. I mean, not walking the picket lines. And there's numerous examples of Elizabeth Warren not being there when she's needed. And so she's made it clear that she's not an ally, that she's an ally in name only. And that's, again, deeply disastrous. All right, so let's go from there to this next story here. This is Chris Matthews. Okay. Chris Matthews just took a shot at Bernie Sanders during an interview with John Kerry. Take a look.
No, but you get the wrong candidate, you might lose the whole thing. What about Bernie Sanders? Do you think he's a danger as a president, as a candidate? You're out there fighting like hell for Joe Biden. How much of danger is that Bernie Sanders, who's now leading in the polls, in the latest poll out there in Iowa, how big a danger would he be to the country or to the party, the Democrats?
Jesus Christ, man. If that's not a loaded question, I don't know what is. I mean, Bernie Sanders is going to be a danger, right? Is he a danger to the Democratic Party? Is it a danger? It's a danger. How big of a danger is he? Come on, John Kerry. Tell me how dangerous Bernie Sanders is. Jesus Christ, dude. Wow. Look.
No, but you get the wrong.
All right. So now, John Kerry's response, by the way. So John Kerry at first says, well, I'm not going to get into how much of a danger. I'm not going to really answer that question, except that I'm totally going to get into it. Take a look.
Well, Chris, I made a vow to myself that in coming out here, I'm not going to be drawing distinctions between the candidates. That's up to them. They have a debate tomorrow night. And one of the reasons I think Bernie and others are criticizing him is because they know they don't have what he has, which is 8 years of experience.
Where do you stand? You voted for the authorization. How do you deal with that charge from Bernie?
Well, again, Chris, as I said, I think Bernie is striking out at Joe because he doesn't have all of the things that I just listed, the qualifications of having had 8 years sitting on the National Security Council and working as effectively as he did with countries all around the world. I think that Joe obviously acknowledged he thought because of what happened it was a mistake, but he made up for that with his leadership in the effort to try to get us out of Iraq, bring the troops home, and deal with the fake or badly interpreted, contrived evidence that was put forward with respect to what was happening in Iraq at the time. And everybody now knows that it wasn't a slam dunk. It was anything but.
Jesus, that was hard to get through. John Kerry did not sound that enthusiastic about Joe Biden, even though throughout most of that entire segment, and I've had to cut out pieces where he was talking about how Joe Biden is he's the best and he's got the best record and on the war, even though he voted in favor of the war. And look, a disaster, right? This entire segment is why corporate media is absolutely terrible. He's going to say, he actually came out and said that the man who voted, the only person that voted against the disastrous war in Iraq is somehow dangerous to the country and not as good at foreign policy as Joe Biden, who voted in favor of the disastrous war in Iraq. And by the way, you also have Libya. You also have Syria. And so you have all these, disasters, right? Under Joe Biden and President Obama. You had drone strikes, you had an increases of terrorism, things like that. So that's disastrous. And by the way, the war in Iraq that Joe Biden was in favor of was a result of the administration that lied to the American people, that gave faulty intelligence in order to start a war in the Middle East for oil. That war was a disaster for America. Trillions of dollars wasted, thousands of lives, hundreds of thousands of civilians were killed. Innocent civilians, Iraqi citizens. And so if more people voted like Bernie Sanders against the war, none of that would have happened. And yet, John Kerry, how much more of a disaster is Bernie Sanders going to be on foreign policy? Can't be much worse than what we got, both from Bush, Obama, and from Trump as well. Because Trump has continued, doing these attacks, nearly started a war with Iran. Again, how can these people even be taken seriously whatsoever? They just spouted nothing but garbage. And look, Joe Biden voted for this war back in 2003. He voted in favor of it and supported it even until around 2005. And this whitewashing, this gaslighting from corporate media, MSNBC, no, it's not going to be effective because we actually do have facts, and the facts are that the Iraq vote, the crime bill, trying to cut Social Security, working with segregationists, being against forced busing for racial minorities, that is the legacy of Joe Biden. If anybody's dangerous to the country, it's Joe Biden. Because Joe Biden, number one, he's going to get hammered by Donald Trump, right? And if he wins, he will continue the same old status quo that created Trump in the first place, while also continuing a disastrous foreign policy that we have seen under, again, the Obama administration, the Bush administration, and the Trump administration. He's a disaster. And yet hacks like Chris Matthews are going to go around and continue smearing Bernie Sanders as some sort of dangerous radical, when in reality, most things that Bernie Sanders has said, he has been absolutely right on, and he has had a record of being right for the last 40 years. That's an actual track record to be proud of. All right. Look, that's all I got for you guys today. That's all I got time for. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Please subscribe to the channel. Consider becoming a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation, or a channel member by hitting the join button below. Thank you guys. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you guys later.
Mike Pounds.
Please clap.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.